Okay, good day everyone. Now we will be discussing the Philippine Electrical Code or PEC2 as per requirement to our subject E13. So for the contents of our report, this discussion will be circulating on the following listed topics that are presented on your screen. So for the reporters, we do have Jacob Nelvin, Mendoza, John Vincent, and Palacio, Lender. So these are the following contents for our report. First, we do have the Article 2.25. It revolves on outside branch circuits and feeder, followed by general scope and other articles. Then 2.25.1.3, calculation of loads 600 volts, nominal or less. So it will be divided into two categories, branch circuits and feeders, and 2.25.1.4 conductor covering, 2.25.1.5 for the size of conductors in 600 volts, nominals or less. The 2.25.1.6 conductor size and support, which also dwelling for two categories, the overhead spans and festoon lighting. Next is 2.25.1.7, the lighting equipment installed outdoors, falling in the category of general, common, neutral, and 277 volts to ground, and lastly 600 volts between conductors. Next is 2.25.1.10, wiring and buildings, 2.25.1.11, circuits, exits, and entrances, 2.25.1.12, open conductor supports, 2.25.1.14, open conductors spacing. It has four categories: A for 600 volts, nominal or less, over 600 volts, nominal for B. C, separation from other circuits and conductors on board for letter D. And for the next content is supports over building that is in lane with 2.25.1.15, attachment to buildings revolve on Article 2.25.1.16 that has two categories also. A is for point attachment and B for means of attachment. Then 2.25 1.17 must supports, 2.25.1.18 clearance from ground, 2.25.1.19 clearances from buildings for conductors of not over 600 volts nominal. So it has five. For letter A, above roofs from non-buildings or non-bridge structures for letter B. For letter C, horizontal clearances, final spans for letter D, and clearances from windows. Under final spans, should I say, there are three categories: clearances from windows, vertical clearance in building, and lastly, letter is for zone fire ladders. And 2.25.1.20 revolves on mechanical protection of conductors. 2.25.1.21 dwell in multi-conductor cables on exterior surfaces of buildings. 2.25.12.22 are all about raceways on exterior surfaces of buildings or other structures. Outdoor lamp holders for 2.25.1.24, and location of outdoor lamps for 2.25.125, and 2.25.1.26 allotted for vegetation as support, and 2.25.2 is allotted for more than one building or other structure. In addition, we are also discussing the 2.25.21, the number of supplies, and has falling, and it has a five categories. Letter A for special conditions, B special occupancies, C capacity requirements, D different characteristics, E documented switching procedures. And then furthermore, disconnecting means will be discussed in Article 2.25.2.2, and then location will also discuss in 2.25.2.3, and then the maximum number of disconnect will also be tackled in 2.25.2.4. 2.25.2.4 will be allotted for maximum number of disconnects. It has two purpose for the general and single pole units, and then 2.25.2.5 grouping of disconnect that will fall into also two categories. We do have the general and additional disconnecting needs. Then 2.25 to 2.6 access to occupants suitable for service equipment will be allotted for 2.25.27. Identification will also be allotted for 2.25.28, and then the Article 2.25.2.9 will be disconnect construction, and it includes the following: manually or operable, B simultaneous opening of poles, D disconnection of grounded conductor, and lastly indicating. And then 2.25.2.10 rating of disconnect. So four categories will be discussed. First is one circuit installation, two circuit installation, one family dwelling, and all others. And then access to overcurrent productive devices under 2.25.2.11 over 600 volts is under 2.25.3. 2.25.3.1 is all about sizing of conductors. 2.25.3.2 is all about isolating switches, and 2.25.3.3 is all about location. So the type will be fall into 2.25.3.4, and then 2.25.3.11 clearances over roadways, walkways, rail, water, and the open land will also discuss the 22 kilovolts normal to ground or less over 22 kilovolt nominal to ground and special cases. So lastly, um, this discussion will boils down sa 2.25.3.12, which dwell on the clearances over buildings and other structures. So this article will have a two categories. The first one is the 22 kilovolts nominal to ground or less, and followed by over 22 kilovolts nominal to ground. Okay, my name is Lander Palacio, and now I'll be discussing the Philippine Electrical Code 2. Okay, now, what is PEC2? Ano ba kapag sinabi nating Philippine Electrical Code 2 or PEC2? As for definition, it says here that Philippine Electrical Code 2 are basically written to encourage best and safest practices outside the building. So the reason why yung PEC2 po is na-formulate or na-establish is mainly because it is to have a rule book na kailangan nating sundin kung saan nag-establish ito ng mga work standard for the safe use of electricity. So tayo bilang electrical engineer and practitioners in the near future, so these standards and these written codes are very beneficial when it comes to our endeavor in work. Next. Okay, now we will be discussing the 2.25 outside branch circuits and feeders. So it says here that service conductors are not always outside conductors that run to buildings. They could be branches or feeder circuit cables coming from another structure. So they might offer power to a separate building outside machinery or air illumination. So dito lang, sinasabi daw yung service conductors, hindi naman daw palagi na sila yung outside conductors na nagpapatakbo sa isang building. It could be somehow a branches or feeder circuit na nanggagaling sa ibang structure. Could be it might offer ng a power to a separate building outside machinery or area illumination. Next. So we do have the feeders and branch circuits. So what are the feeders? So yung feeders, ito yung mga power lines through which electricity is transmitted in power systems. While yung branch circuit naman, it will start at the breaker box. So dun sa breaker box, magsisimula siya and to the extent to the electrical devices connected to the service. So ito yan. So kung makikita natin, so this is the branch circuits as we can see, and then this is the feeder. So dito magsisimula yung feeder, and then dito magtatapos yung feeder, and then dito naman yung branch circuits. So ayan po yung illustration ng branch circuits and feeders. Next is 2.25.1.11 scoop. So this article includes the specification for outside branch circuits and feeders that are installed on or between buildings, structures, or poles on the property, as well as the electrical wiring and equipment needed to serve utilization equipment that is mounted outside of building structures or pole. So dito lang, sinasabi lang na ito yung mga specification or yung mga standards or yung mga written na codes that should be utilized from outside building structures or pole. So it can be between building structures or pole on the property as well yung mga electrical wiring and equipment. So ito naman yung mga other articles. So yung mga application ng mga iba't ibang articles which includes yung mga additional requirements and to specific cases ng PEC2 para sa equipment and conductors. Ito makikita nyo to. This is a table 2.25. 0.1.2 other articles. So yung equipment and conductors, for example, yung branch circuits, may class 1, class 2, and class 3 or yung mga remote control signaling and power limited circuits. So dito natin siya makikita sa article 2.10 and likewise ng mga succeeding na mga articles. So may mga designated naman sila sa table. If we do need to find kung saan sila na nakabilong. Next. So dito naman tayo sa calculation of load, 600 volts, nominal or less. So for the table ng branch circuits, table 2.20.3, it is the general lighting loads by occupancy. And dito nakapalagay kung anong klaseng occupancy, type of occupancy, and unit load. But tapos ang unit niya is volt ampere per square meter. So halimbawa sa armories and auditoriums, we do have the 11 volt amperes per square meter. And then for the churches, meron tayong 11 club and the rest. So makikita nyo naman yan dito. So halimbawa, ito yung pinaka-basic ng mga office building, meron tayong 39. Restaurant, 22, schools, 33, stores, 33, mga warehouse, mga 3. So dito siya naka-specify. So accordingly, dapat sinusunod natin yan kasi yun yung standard. Next. So dito na tayo, 2.20.25 other loads. So ito na yung mga occupancies. So it states here that in all occupancy, the minimum load for each other outlet for general use, receptacles and outlet not used for general illumination shall not be less than that calculated in 2.25A through I, the loads shown being based on ohmical branch circuits. So sinasabi lang po dito daw na sa lahat daw, ang occupancy dapat yung minimum load ng bawat outlet ng bawat outlet for receptacles and outlets not used sa mga general illumination should not be less than yung sa makakalculate natin na as stated dun sa Article 2.2 2.20.25. And then meron ditong exception. So the loads of outlets serving switchboards and switching frames, the loads of outlets serving switchboards and switching frames and telephone exchanges shall be waived from the calculation. So, kung yung loads daw ng outlet from switchboards and switching frames ng telephone shall be waived sa calculation. So, magkakaroon ng consideration. So, we do have here different assets for specific appliances or loads. An outlet for a specific appliances or other load not covered in Article 2.20.25 or B through I shall be calculated based on the ampere rating of the appliance or load served. So dito, dapat nakabase tayo dun sa ampere rating ng mga specific na appliances or load. Kasi kung hindi, parang hindi siya magi-intertwine. So may tendency that masunog or whatsoever na mag-cause pa ng severe na damages. And then for the motor loads, we do have the outlets for motor loads should be calculated in accordance naman with the requirements in 4.30.2.2, 4.30.2.4, and 4.40.1.6. So later on, I'll be discussing yung mga ganyang requirements. And then for electric dryers and household electric cooking appliances, so ito yung mga example nito is yung mga electric cooking na appliances daw natin or naka-specify sa ganitong category. So sure that the load calculation shall be permitted as specified in Article 2.20.3.15 for electric dryers and 2.20.3.16 for electric ranges and other cooking appliances. So kapag mag-install tayo ng mga electric dryers, dapat yung load calculation natin shall be permitted daw as accordance and with compliance dun sa Article 2.20.3.15. And for electric ranges naman and other cooking appliances, dapat naman daw in accordance to 2.20.3.16 para ma-maintain natin yung standardized na work or standardized na set or code para sa ganong klaseng category. And then for luminaires or lighting fixtures, ito naman sa mga ilaw-ilaw. Sinasabi dito that an outlet supplying luminaires lighting fixture shall be calculated based on the maximum volt ampere rating of the equipment and lamps for which the luminaires fixture is rated. So dito, dapat yung outlet daw na nagsusupply dun sa mga luminaires or lighting fixtures. Like for example, yung mga, yung mga masyadong matataas na rates like yung chandelier. So example, yun ang lighting fixtures. Should be calculated yung kanyang maximum volt ampere rating of the equipment kung saan dapat. Kung halimbawa, syempre, kung sa chandelier, dapat na sa chandelier. So for heavy-duty lamp holders, outlet for heavy-duty lamp holders shall be at a minimum of 600 volt ampere. So yung mga mabibigat na or heavy-duty lamp holder should be calculated, sabi, in accordance with PEC2 with the rating of minimum 600 volt amperes. For the show windows naman, it shall be calculated naman in accordance, it's either of the following. So meron tayong dalawa. Yung una, the unit load per outlet as required in other provision of this section and at 200 volt amperes per 300 squared of show window. So yung mga show windows daw should be calculated naman daw in accordance. Maalin dito sa dalawa. Yung una, kung ano yung sinasabi dun sa bawat outlet na required according din sa PEC at anong provision sa ganong klaseng section. At yung isa naman, kada 200 volt ampere at 200 volt ampere kada 300 squared yung sukat para sa show window. And sign and outlet lining. So sign and outlet lining, outlet shall be calculated as minimum of 1,200 volt amperes for each required branch circuit specified in section 6.0.15. And then for the PIX multi-outlet assemblies, PIX multi-outlet assemblies used in other than uh, dwelling units for the guest rooms or guest suites of hotels or motels shall be calculated in accordance with H1 or H2. For the purposes of this section, the calculation shall be permitted to based on the portion that contains receptacles outlet. So dito na yung mga maramihan na to. So it usually nakikita natin sa mga hotels or sa mga motel. So yung mga ganong klaseng outlet, yung mga multi-outlet na mag-assemble tayo, multi-outlet assembly should be calculated daw based dun sa accordance ng H1 and H2. So next, okay. Now, calculation of loads, 600 volts nominal or less for the feeders. General, it states here that the calculated load of a feeder or server shall not be less than the sum of the loads on the branch circuit supplied as determined by part 2 of this article. After any applicable demand factors permitted by part 3 or part 4 or required by part 5 have been applied. So dito yung feeders, ang sinasabi lang dito, that yung calculated load natin shall not be less than sa lahat ng sum ng loads natin sa branch circuit supplied. Bakit? Siyempre kapag mas malaki yun, may tendency na masunog yun. So as determined daw by part 2 of this article. So after nun, we can also apply some applicable demand factors permit ng part 3 and part 4 or required by also part 5. Next, so ito, for example, sa table 2.20.3.3, lighting load demands factor. So type of occupancy dwelling unit. So dito portion of lighting load to which demand factor applies. So per 30,000 or less at from 3,000 to 120,000 at remainder over 120,000 at so yung demand factor niya is ito 100 at saka 35. Seems with hospital first 50,000 or less at remainder over 50,000 at so ang demand factor naman is 40 to 20, and then hotels and motel 20,000 or less at 20,000 to 100,000, remainder over 100,000 at sa mga warehouse 12,500, and all others is total volt amperes tapos 100. Okay, conductor covering. So, open individual or aerial yung pinakabukana. Overhead conductors must be insulated or covered when they are 3,000 millimeter or less than from any building or structure other than supporting poles or tower. Except for type MI, cable conductors and cable and raceway must be of the rubber covered of thermoplastic type and must adhere to Article 3.10.1.8 in wet environments. So, piston lighting conductors must be of the thermoplastic or rubber covered type. So dito, yung mga overhead conductor shall be insulated daw or naka-covered when they are 3,000 millimeter or less from any building or structure other than supporting poles or tower. So there's an exception. It says here that yung type na MI cable, yung mga conductors daw sa ganong klaseng kable at sa mga raceway must be rubberized or rubber covered or naka-thermoplastic type. And kapag naman nasa wet location sila or nasa wet environments, uh, they should adhere sa compliance with Article 3.10.1.8. So there's a one exception here. So it says here that ground dead circuit conductors and equipment grounding conductors may be left bare or covered with otherwise permitted by the cause. So yun yung pinaka-exception sa conductor covering. Okay, 2.25.1.5 size of conductor 600 volts nominal or less. So sinasabi naman dito that the ampacity of outer branch circuit and feeder conductor shall be in accordance with Article 3.10.1.15 based on loads as determined under 2.20.20 and Part 2.28.3. So yung ampacity daw ng mga branch circuit natin and feeder na conductors should be compliant palagi, no? In accordance with 3.10.1.15, base dun sa loads that being determined naman under 2.20.2.20 like what I have said kanina dun sa table. Okay, conductor size and support under 2.25.1.6. First, we do have the overhead spans. So ito yung open individual conductor shall not be smaller than the following. So pag 600 volts yung pinag-uusapan natin or nominal or less than 5.5 millimeter squared or may sukat siyang 2.6 millimeter diameter, copper or 8.0 millimeter squared, 3.2 millimeter diameter, aluminum for spans up to 15 millimeter in length, and 8.0 millimeter squared that has a 3.2 millimeter diameter, copper or 14 millimeter squared, aluminum for a longer span unless supported by a messenger wire. For over 600 volts naman, we do have nominal 14 millimeter squared copper or 22 millimeter squared aluminum, kung saan naman it should be open individual conductors, and 8.0 millimeter squared or 3.2 millimeter diameter na merong sukat na merong diameter that 3.2 millimeter. So 8 copper or 14 millimeter squared aluminum were in sa kable naman. So for the feston lighting, yung mga overhead conductors sa mga piston lighting shall not be smaller than 3.5 millimeter squared or may diameter na 2.0 millimeter. So sinasabi dito that unless the conductors are supported by messenger wires. So in all the spans exceeding 12 meter, the conductor shall be supported by messenger wire. The messenger wire shall be supported by strain insulator. Conductors or messenger wire shall not be attached to any fire escape, downspout, or plumbing equipment. So dito sa feston lighting, it should be supported daw siya ng messenger wire. And yung messenger wire should not be attached or hindi dapat masyadong dapat hindi naka-connect or hindi naka-install sa mga fire escape, downspout, or plumbing equipment. Maybe because um, to prevent severe na damage or baka magkaroon pa ng mga aksidente if the messenger wire are being installed sa mga ganong particular na area. Okay, now we will be moving sa 2.25 lighting equipment installed outdoors. Okay, so yung mga outdoor lighting can be mounted siya, no, on the side of building structures, on pole, or even sa mga trees. According sa code, any luminaire or like what I've said, any lighting fixtures installed outdoors and exposed mga weather must be listed as suitable for location that are intertwined on the label with the marking that states suitable for wet location. So meaning, kapag mag-install tayo ng mga lighting equipment sa labas, kailangan yung make sure natin nagagamitin nating appliance, nagagamitin nating electrical equipment, electrical uh, materials are suitable for wet location because of the weather conditions that we do have. Kasi minsanan, kasi dapat yan kapag umuulan, they are water resistant kasi bakit ka naman mag-install, di ba, ng lighting equipment sa labas if hindi siya water resistant. So kapag umulan, sira agad 'yon. So although codes allow other lighting features to be mounted on trees, they also mandate that the overhead conductor span cannot be supported by trees or other living or dead vegetation. So later on, it will be discussed naman sa latter part ng aming presentation. So I'll just give you an overview. So sinasabi din daw sa code, sa PEC2 na although pwede tayong maglagay ng mga ilaw malapit, pero hindi dapat dun sa maraming vegetation or trees kasi there is a tendency, alam mo, kung may bagyo, hindi matutumba yon. So, masisira lang yon. And then, makakapag-cause pa ng accident. So, with any electrical installations, as we all know, there are electrical codes that must be followed. So, yung mga outdoor electrical installations are no longer different. Kasi same with light, dun sa PEC1 kung saan sa loob naman, ito naman sa labas. So, because outer light fixtures may be exposed, like what I have done sa lahat ng mga sorts of weather, they are designed to seal out wind, rain, at saka yung pabago-bago nating panahon. So, most outdoor pictures also have special protective covers to keep your light working in adverse conditions. Example na nito is yung GFCI, yung ground fault conductor indicator. So, I know all of you are familiar with that naman na. So for the general, it says here that for the supply lighting equipment installed outdoors, the branch circuit shall comply with Article 2.10 and 2.25.1.7. So it will be discussed on the next slide. So sinasabi lang po sa outdoor lighting equipment or dun sa article na to, dapat yung pagsusupply natin ng mga lighting equipment sa yung naka-install outsourced, it should be compliant ulit, no? Sa Article 2.10 and 2.25.1.7 hanggang D. Kasi if we are not following the restrictions and the jurisdiction ng PEC2, magkakaroon tayo ng problema dyan. So, it states here, sa common neutral, okay, ito na yun. What is common neutral? Or ano ba yung nakapaloob dyan sa common neutral na yan? So yung common neutral, sinasabi lang dito that the ampacity of the neutral conductor shall not be less than do sa pinaka-maximum net computed load current between the neutral and all underground conductors connected to any one piece of circuit. So Article 2.25 225 covers yung ganitong rule for installation of outside branch circuits like what I have mentioned earlier. And for the branch, yun sa branch circuits and feeders. So as noted in 225.7, yung maximum na net na makakalculate natin para sa load current between neutral conductor and all other underground conductor connected to any one piece of the circuit. This applies to lighting equipment installed outdoors. So meron naman tayong sumunod, yung 277 volts to ground. So it stats here that yung mga circuits exceeding daw o lumampas po ng 120 volts nominal, tandaan natin ha, between conductors and that exceeding 277 volts. So ibig sabihin, lumampas siya ng 120 volts pero hindi siya lalampas ng 277 volts. To ground shall be permitted to supply luminaires o yung mga lighting fixtures for illumination of outdoor areas of industrial establishment. It's either office, buildings, school, stores, and other commercial or public buildings kung saan yung mga luminaires nila or lighting fixtures nila are naka-installed outdoors. And it should not less than be 900 millimeter from windows, platforms, fire escapes, and the like. And lastly, we do have the 600 volts between conductors. So ano naman po ito? So ito naman, 'di ba, meron tayong 277 volts to ground. Sabi dito, exceeding 122 dito sa letter C, exceeding 122 but not exceeding 277 volts. So ibig sabihin lampas ng 120 volts pero hindi lalagpas ng 277 volts yung sinasabi sa letter C. Pero dito naman sa ano naman, ito na yon, circuits exceeding 277 volts dito sa 600 volts between conductors, nominal to ground and that exceeding at hindi lalampas naman ng 600 volts shall be permitted to supply the auxiliary equipment. Yun yung mga, alam mo, electric discharge lamps. In accordance naman siya sa Article 2.10.6.1. Okay, next po tayo. Okay, I decided to include these different types of outdoor lighting installation because basically, they are mainly, nakikita natin siya, outdoor, of course, outdoor. In a wide range, marami sila, di ba? So, unang-una, yung pag-install natin ng outdoor is considered as an investment that offers many valuable benefits in return. So, una, bakit nga ba parang marami siyang benefits in return? So, of course, nakakapag-improve siya ng safety, security, and lastly, bonus din for having, it enhances yung pagiging aesthetic taste. So, yun yung parang mga pinaka main reason niya kung bakit nagbibigay rin siya ng valuable return for us. So una, bago tayo mag-work sa mga electricity or performing any lighting installation, it is important na kailangan din natin i-take yung mga safety precaution. Why? Because safety is paramount, no? Safety is extremely paramount in everything that we do. So, lalo na kuryente yung ating pinag-uusapan. So, it can be deadly. So, una, kailangan natin i-turn off yung mga power source or much better mag-install na tayo ng mga GFCI for added protection kahit medyo pricey siya, no, against electrical shock. It is also important to consult with licensed electricians or yung mga designated na mga tao sa kanilang porte. Hindi naman tayo basta-basta mag-hire ng someone na medyo may alam lang. So, it should be in accordance dun sa mga law bago sila mag-install ng mga different types of outdoor lighting and installation. Of course, if ever na may mangyaring masama, syempre, meron tayong habol sa kanila. And of course, we are secured then if we are pertaining dun sa mga designator or mga specified na tao kasi they have the license and they have the authority to perform. So, una, meron tayo ditong floodlights. Ito po, floodlights. So yung floodlights ay by definition, sinasabi that it have an adjustable angle beam that can be rotated to focus on a specific area. So ito daw po ay parang it can be installed on ground or mounted. So pwede siyang installed sa mga ground or pwede sa matataas na area na mga structure, pwede din siya sa mga walls or poles. It also says that yung one of the characteristics that floodlights have is it lasts longer and use less energy than any halogen or fluorescent lamps. Outdoor floodlights are commonly ginagamit siya to fix an item or such as monument or so sa mga fixed items. Like for example, yung um, sa mga monument or sa mga flagpole, na mga nakapix na yung mga items doon, di ba? Or to illuminate large areas such as sports fields, parks, playgrounds, and parking lots. So, ano naman po yung magiging benefits if we install floodlights, no? Accordingly, sabi, by flooding dark areas with light floodlights, it can help to improve safety. So, bakit? Kasi it makes easier for people to see potential hazards, no? That can cause yung maaring mag-cause ng slips, trips, and falls. It can also be beneficial for discouraging yung mga property damages, crime and vandalism. Kasi nga yung light niya is masyadong maliwanag. So makikita na natin yung mga dark areas. So so dito nagpo-produce din sila ng very little heat and changes in humidity. So these wall-mounted outer lighting features are commonly used to replace traditional lighting wall packs on commercial and industrial building. So saan naman po natin ito ginagamit? No? So nasabi ko na naman yung ilan sa kanina. So these are some additionals. Ano po? Sa parking lots, it can be also sa parking lots, it can also be used sa mga driveways and walkways, also large outdoor areas, yung mga patios, pavilions, and etc. Stadiums like yung sa mga, like what I have said kanina, di ba, yung arena, yung mga sports centers or mga sports fields, outdoor performance venues, of course, because this is one of the outdoor lighting. And billboards and signage, kasi masyadong maliwanag, so kailangan yun doon. And what are the considerations naman? Or what are the tips pag improve natin? So according sa PEC2, select your location and identify a nearby power source bago tayo mag-install ng floodlights. And then make sure natin that we have a safe way to access the installation location, and then cut a hole to fix the fixtures and run electrical wire through it. Connect the fixture to a power source and test the lights and features. And then kapag meron tayong problema, so make adjustments accordingly. But make sure pala that the person who are operating or installing or performing ng ganitong klaseng installation should be in accordance dun sa PEC2 ng mga nasabing practitioners. Hindi dapat basta-basta lang, no? And then, if there's any problem with regarding sa floodlights, we can consult a licensed electrician or practitioners kung meron tayong mga problema. And then next, we do have the landscape lights. So, ano naman po yung landscape lights? Kapag sinabi natin landscape light, by definition, sinasabi daw po that it relies on fixtures like spotlights, lanterns, cones, and globes to create an aesthetically pleasing lighting design na nagbibigay highlights, no, sa mga buildings and landscaping features at night while also improving security. So, same lang din siya sa floodlights, no? Ang parang pinaka-primary concern nila is why do we need to install outer lighting? Of course, to improve security and to present and to have a aesthetic na ambience, no, yun yung sinasabi natin. So saan naman po natin to ginagamit? So ginagamit din po natin siya sa mga parks, sa mga office or building terraces, yung mga ganito. Kung yung nakikita niyo yan, we can also use this sa mga public spaces and pathways, sa mga entrances and exits. So dun sa mga entrances and exit, ginagamit po natin yan. Along walkways and driveways dun sa mga pathways, sa mga driveways. So usually ginagamit din natin yan. And then for aesthetic purposes, we can use it for near architectural and signages or landscaping pictures. So, in addition pala dito sa landscape light, we can also use a variety of angles and features type. It's either sa pathway lights, up lights, and directional lights. For example, kailangan natin yung landscape lights ginagamit natin, for example, kailangan natin na mag-create ng layers and visual effects, no, as media platform. And then but keep in mind po, no, kapag gagamitin natin yung landscape lights, we should also check the wattage or lumens in mind, kasi if they're too bright, then they may create a glare. So, pag masyadong maliwanag na, kasi usually ginagamit siya for the security and for the safety purposes. So, kapag medyo maliwanag na, so baka biglang makasilaw, so baka makaka-identify. So, we should also check kung ano ba yung suitable na landscape or ano ba yung suitable na brightness level niya, no, sa isang lugar na pagagamitin natin. So, na-adjust naman daw yan. So motion sensor light. So I know some of you are very familiar with this one. It was being used na to um matagal na panahon na since CCTV pa is being born. So kapag motion sensor lights, um sabi dito, any outdoor light can have a motion sensor or path of control including to help manage lighting. So ito yon. So yung motion sensor lights are ginagamit siya kapag gusto nating i-manage yung lighting. So halimbawa sa CCTV, usually kinakabitan sila ng motion sensor lights lalo na um, kapag hindi sila ah, pag hindi yung CCTV panggabi, like I mean hindi siya nakaka-detect or hindi siya nakaka-view kapag gabi. So uh, we need yung ganitong klaseng motion sensor light. So kapag may dumaan, so automatic siya mag-iilaw kasi yung motion yung nade-detect niya. So like that. So yung motion sensor lights or yung tinatawag nating photo control or photo cell na meron siya is nag-act siya more like a timer, and it's more commonly found on parking lot lights. The lights turn at dusk on a certain level of darkness, then turn off in the morning when the sun is shining. Photocells are also used for many outdoor lighting applications. So ito, usually, since panggabi lang, so kapag umaga na, hindi na siya gumagana kasi uh, nakikita na yung paligid. So usually ginagamit siya sa mga panggabi na purposes. So yung motion sensor light has a variety din depending kung gaano katagal nag-stay yung isang tao or yung motion. So built-in timers can be adjusted naman accordingly. So saan po ito ginagamit, no? So it can be used sa mga driveways, ayun sa garages. Yan, mga yan. Ginagamit yan dyan sa mga alleyways, sa mga walkways, entrances, and saka mga exits. So what are the tips naman po kapag mag-install na tayo ng ganito, no? Motion sensor lights. So unang-una, kailangan natin identify kung ano ba yung proper location for the fixture. Hindi masyadong mataas and hindi masyadong mababa. And then next is we need to adjust the field of view angle to set the distance range of an appropriate level. Set necessary control naman for distance range and timer. And according din sa PEC, we should position the lamp, no, and detector far apart so heat from the lamp doesn't set off the sensor. So kailangan natin yung lamp at saka yung detector should be set apart kasi yung init na nanggagaling sa lamp or dyan sa bumbilya na yan is maaaring makapag-set off dun sa sensor niya. So kasi kapag hindi naging protective yung kanyang fixtures, then the select bulb will then and make sure that yung pag-install nyo are protected, no? Kasi if may tendency na umulan and then may make sure that you are installing yung motion sensor light accordingly and tama kasi um, there para hindi ma-infiltrate ng water yung na socket nito. So next po tayo. So dito naman using the right door outdoor lighting. So dito yung table na to is just basically parang an overview if you are planning to have a accent lighting, focus area, large area securities, and what type of lightings are suitable or will intertwine dun sa ganong klaseng application and what are the best features. Like for examples, we do have the accent lighting for the application. And ano bang klaseng type of lighting ang gagamitin natin? It's either landscape lighting or lighting spotlights. And then we can also have our best features. It's either bullets, globes, pathway lights, and walls sconces. And then for the focus areas naman, ito yung mga usually yung mga focus areas are yung mga if you are familiar if like what I have mentioned kanina, like yung sa mga bulletin, yun. So mga yan, so ginagamitan yan. Spotlight, parang same na lang din naman siya sa landscape, so I don't need to elaborate to. And then we can use a bullet type. And for the large areas, ito na yung masyadong malawak ang areas, parang yun yung mga ground or mga parking area, we can use floodlights. So halogen floodlights can be advisable to use, and induction floodlights are advisable to use also. And for the security, so like what I have said, floodlights is also beneficial since masyadong maliwanag siya and malaki yung wide range siya. And then motion sensor, ito talaga yung pinaka-suitable for for security purposes since sa CCTV. And we can also add what are the best pictures that are suitable sa ganitong klaseng applications. So we can use bullet spotlights and wall packs. Next po. So ways to power outdoor lighting. So we do have the low voltage, line voltage, and solar. So these three categories are the ways to how we can power outdoor lighting. So una, meron tayong low voltage. Ito na po yung pag sinabi natin low voltage from the word itself, low, ibig sabihin nag-ooperate lang po sila ng mababa, no? At 12 voltage. So sinabi dito that it is energy efficient and easy to install. Yung mga line voltage naman po, sino naman po yung nag-ooperate at 120 volts. So mataas na yung kanyang volts, 10 times compared dito sa low voltage na sinasabi natin. Ay, sorry. So line voltage, it requires electrical, so dito nagre-require na po sila ng mga electrical conduit para maprotektahan na po natin yung mga wires at saka mga junction boxes para sa mga outer applications. So I know, alam niyo na kung bakit important yung electrical conduit for the protection naman ng mga wires para hindi magkaroon ng aberya. And line voltage are the best options for floodlights and high power lighting. So sa floodlights, since malaki yung kanyang scope, yung kanyang range, so line voltage is doon siya nagpo-fall sa ganong category. And then lastly, we do have the solar. Ano naman po yung solar? So pag sinabi natin solar, it require no wiring. No? Solar-powered fixtures need to be installed in a location that receives a lot of natural light. So from the word itself, solar, kapag sinabi natin solar, they are getting the energy, electrical energy is being converted, no? Yung nagagaling naman sa sun. So, meaning, yun yung mga ilalagay na natin dun sa area kung saan maaraw. Kasi kung solar type siya, tapos sumaaraw, hindi yung sumaaraw, anong use nun, di ba? So, solar-powered lights are easy to install, basically, kasi ilalagay lang natin siya. And great for outdoor areas kung saan, kung gusto nating makatipid, no? Where electrical power isn't really accessible. So, ito yung sa mga area na, um, sorry, so ito yung balik tayo, sorry kanina for the delay. Ito yung mga area na wala masyado. So ito, according sa PEC, di ba may mga area naman, yung mga remote areas, pag sa provinces, di ba may mga area pa naman na hindi masyadong ganun na nakukunan ng mga kuryente. So we can use this solar, no? To outdoor para sa safe purposes din naman. Okay, next is 2.25.1.10 wiring on buildings na po tayo. So, wiring on buildings, it states here that the installation of outside wiring on surfaces of buildings shall be permitted for circuits of not over 600 volts. Nominal as open wiring on insulator, as multi-conductor cable, as type C MC cable, as type MI cable, as messenger supported wiring, like what I have discussed earlier. But in rigid metal conduit, in intermediate metal conduit, in rigid non-metallic conduit, in cable trays as cable bus and wireways, sa mga auxiliary gutters, in electrical metal tubing and flexible metal conduit, in liquid tight flexible metal conduit, in liquid flexible non-metallic conduit, and in busways. So yung mga circuits daw po na may 600 volts or over 600 volts, nominal should be installed as provided in Article 3.0.2.7. Okay. Okay, dito na. Next. Okay, so meron po tayo dito mga reminders, no? So, take note, yung mga type UF cable must be physically marked as underground feeder cable and is available from 14 AWG through 40 AW copper and from 12 AWG through aluminum. And then yung mga wire installed natin in underground conduits must have a W in its insulation design designation such as THWNR. So kapag may mga wet location, I know some of you are very familiar na sa ganitong mga units. So kailangan may W, no? W. Kasi they are designed for being water resistant or for wet purposes location. Next. Okay, 2.25.1.11 circuits, exits, and entrances. So kung saan dito pumapasok yung mga circuits and saka yung mga entrances, lumalabas. So it says here that the Article 2.25.1.11 are where outside branch and feeder circuits leave or enter a building. So yun lang din naman kung paano papasok yung branch and feeder circuits, kung saan yung location, no? Sa isang building as per requirement sa Article 2.30.4.13 and 2.30.4.15 shall be applied. So as we can see on the left side, ayan yung kanyang illustration. So ito yung circuit entrance, and so nandiyan yung circuit entrance, and so dyan na din yung exit. So about 2.25.1.12 open conductor supports. It says here that the open conductor shall be supported by either glass or porcelain knobs, rocks, brackets, or strain insulator. So yung mga open conductor support natin. Pag sinabing open conductor support, open nga. So it shall be supported daw po, no? By glass or porcelain knobs, rocks, or brackets, or strain insulators. Next. So for the spacing, we do have for this for the spacing, it will be uh, it is written in Article 2.25.1.14, open conductor spacing. So we do have three categories. Una, meron tayong 600 volts, nominal or less. So conductor of 600 volts, nominal or less, shall be compliant po sa spacing provided in table 2.30.4.12. So later on, I'll show you kung ano yan. And then, kapag lampas naman po tayo ng 600 volts nominal, take note, nominal yan ha. Conductors of over 600 volt nominal shall comply naman po sa spacing provided in section 1.10.37 and 4.90.2.4. So makikita po natin yan sa libro ng PEC. And then for C, separation from other circuit. Ito na yung separation naman from other circuit. So yung mga open conductor shall be separated in compliance with PEC2 from open conductors of other circuit or system by having a measurement not less than 100 millimeter. Okay po, tayo dyan. Next. Okay, we do have the conductor of poles. So conductor of poles have a separation of not less than 300 millimeter where not placed or rocks or brackets. So yung mga conductor na supported in poles shall not provide a horizontal climbing space not less than the following. So we do have the four requirements. So meron tayong una, power conductors below communication conductor. It should be 750 mm. Power conductors alone or above communication conductors, we do have two categories. It might fall first, 300 volts or less, yung measurement niya should be 600 millimeter, and then B, over 300 volts should be 750 millimeter. And for communication conductors below power conductors, so same lang siya dun sa una, no? It should be 750 millimeters. And then communication conductors alone, there's no requirement.
So next tayo,
Wait lang,
pangalan ko, Mendoza John Vincent. So sa 2.25.1.18, nahati yung clearance natin sa apat na measurements. So ang sabi sa dito is overhead spans of open conductors and open multi-conductor cables of not over 600 volts nominal shall have the clearance of not less than the following. So ang sabi dito, yung una is 3,000 millimeter above finished grade sidewalks or any platform projection of which they might be reached where the voltage does not exceed 150 volts to ground and accessible to pedestrian only. So para sa mga walkway lang itong 3,000 millimeter dahil hindi siya masasagi or madadamage yung wire or cable natin dahil mga tao lang yung dumadaan dito or mga bisikleta. Next. Yung pangalawang clearance natin ay 3,600 millimeter. Sabi dito is over residential property and driveways and those commercial areas not subject to truck traffic where the voltage not exceed 300 volts to ground. So ito namang 3,600 millimeter ito naman ay sa mga compounds or driveways at commercial areas. Mataas siya upang hindi madamage yung cable natin na caused by vehicles or mga truck na matataas. Next, 4,500 millimeter. For those areas listed in the 3,600 millimeter classifications where the voltage exceeds 300 volts to the ground. So dito naman, same lang sila sa 3,600 millimeter, but ito yung mga wires or cables na yung voltage nila ay 300 volts above. So last clearance is 5,500 millimeter over public streets, alleys, roads, parking areas subject to truck traffic, driveways on other than residential property, and other land traversed by vehicles such as cultivated, grazing, forests, and orchards. So ito naman is para sa mga main road kung saan laging dinadaanan ng trucks or malalaking vehicle. And sa mga farmland, na may malalaking equipment, kailangan na mataas yung cables natin para hindi or ma-avoid yung electrocution and damage sa wire kung nasagi man yung wire natin. Next. So, lipat tayo sa 2.25.1.19. So, ito yung clearances from buildings for conductors of not over 600 volts nominal. So, meron tayo ditong A, B, C, D hanggang E. So, above roofs from non-building or non-bridge structures, horizontal clearances, final spans. So, yung final spans natin ay nahati sa tatlo. Meron tayong clearance from the windows, vertical clearance, building openings, and yung last natin is a zone for fire ladders. So, next slide please. So, A, above roofs, overhead spans of open conductors and open multi-conductor cable shall have a vertical clearance of not less than 2,400 millimeter above the roof surface. The vertical clearance above the roof level shall be maintained for a distance not less than 900 millimeter in all direction from the edge of the roof. So, sa above roofs, kailangan yung distance between the roof and yung wire is dapat not less than 2,400 millimeter. Kasi over time, dahil sa heat or sa weather, humahaba yung wire natin. So, lulundo siya, kaya dapat malaki yung allowance between the roof and sa wire. And sa perimeter naman ng roof, dapat siya ay not less than 900 millimeter ang distance nito. Next. Doon naman tayo sa from non-building or non-bridges structures. Ay, sorry. So, may dalawang exception pa pala tayo dito. So, yung exception number 1, the area above the roof surface of subject to pedestrian or vehicular traffic shall have a vertical clearance from the roof surface in accordance with the clearance requirements of 2.25.1.18. So, sa pangalawang exception naman, meron tayong ditong where the voltage between the conductors that not exceed 300 and the roof has a slope of 100 minimum or 100 millimeter in 300 millimeter or greater, or a reduction in clearance to 900 millimeter shall be permitted. So, ang sinasabi lang dito sa exception na pwede nating hindi sundin yung reductions na or clearance na 900 millimeter kung yung slope ng bubong natin is nasa 100 millimeter or sa 300. Next. So ito yung pang-exception number 3, where the voltage between conductors that not exceed 300, a reduction in clearance above the only overhanging portion of the roof to not less than 450 millimeter shall be permitted if yung number 1 natin na factor is not more than 1,800 millimeter of the conductors, 1,200 millimeter horizontally, pass above the roof overhang. And yung pangalawang factor natin is they are terminated at throughout the roof raceways or up-roof support. Next. So, ito yung sinasabi ko na from the non-building or non-bridges structures, from signs, chimney, radios, and television antennas, tanks, and other non-building or non-bridge structure, yung clearance is vertical, diagonal, and horizontal. Dapat, ito yung clearance ito is not or shall not be less than 900 millimeter. Para naman sa mga non-building like yung mga sign, billboards, and bridges, dapat yung allowance hindi tayo bababa sa 900 millimeter. Next, sa letter C, horizontal clearances. So, dapat, dito naman sa clearance shall not be less than 900 millimeter, ito yung mga building na dapat yung clearance natin between sa building and the wire, dapat hindi siya bababa ng 900 millimeter. Next. So, letter D, final spans. Final spans of feeder or branch circuit shall comply with 2.25.1.19. So, ito yung mga in-explain ko kanina, yung D1, D2, and D3. So, number 1, clearance from the window. Final spans to the building they supply or from which they are fed shall be permitted to attach to the building, but they shall be kept not less than 900 millimeter from the windows that are designed to be open, and from doors, porches, balconies, ladders, stairs, fire escapes, or similar location. So, ang exception natin dito sa clearance from the window is yung dapat yung conductors natin dapat nagra-run siya above the top level of the window shall be permitted to be less than 900 millimeter requirement. So next, yung pangalawang factor natin under final spans is, next please. So, ang pangalawa is vertical clearance. The vertical clearance of final spans above or within 900 millimeter measured horizontally of platforms, projection, or surfaces from which they are might be reached shall be maintained in accordance with 2.25.1.18. Next. So, yung pangatlo is buildings opening. So the overhead branch circuits and feeder conductor shall not be installed beneath openings through which material may be moved, such as opening in farm and commercial buildings, and shall not be installed where they obstruct entrance. So balik tayo. Ito yung last clearances from the buildings for conductors, not over 600 volts nominal. So yung last is zone for fire ladders, where buildings exceed 3 stories or 5 meter in height. Overhead line shall be arranged where practicable so that clear space at least 1,800 millimeter wide will be left either adjacent to the building or beginning not over 2,400 millimeter from them to facilitate the raising of ladders when necessary for firefighting. So para sa mga structures na malalaki, dapat yung allowance nila between the building and the wire is dapat more than 1,800 millimeter and 2,400 millimeter. Para ito sa mga ladders in case of fire sa building and other situation like maintenance ng window sa malalaking building. So next. So sa 2.25.1.20, mechanical protection of conductors. So ano nga ba ang mga mechanical protection? Ito yung mga insulators or mga clamps na or conduit. Ito yung mga nagpro-protect or protect sa wire natin just in case na magkaroon tayo ng storm or any physical forces. So, mechanical protection of conductors on buildings, structures, or poles shall be provided for services in 2.30.4.11. So, ano nga ba yung sabi dito sa section na to? Next slide, please. So, ang section na to is yung 2.34.4.11. Ang sabi dito is service entrance conductors installed above ground shall be protected against physical damage as specified in 2.30.4.11. So, yung chapter na to is nahati sa dalawa. So, yung dalawang yon is yung service cables and yung isa is other than service cables. Ito yung mga other wires natin like yung mga sa telecom. So, service cables were subject to physical damage shall be protected by any of the following. So, ang first, rigid metal conduit, intermediate metal conduit, scheduled A-tiered, rigid non-metallic conduit, electrical metallic tubing, or other approved means. So, ang sabi dito, so itong mga binanggit ko na material is required upang maproteksyonan yung mga wires natin. So, sa other service cables naman, individual open conductors and cables other than service shall not be installed within 3,000 millimeter of grade level or were exposed to physical damage. Para sa mga other cables natin na dapat may cover sila para hindi exposed sa weather or physical forces. And dapat may nakalagay yung cables natin na 3,000 mm from the grade level para ma-avoid natin yung ma-damage yung wear or mag-cause pa ng accidents. So from the right side, makikita natin dito yung meter base. Ito yung picture kung saan dito nagsisimula yung supply natin ng kuryente. So makikita natin yung meter base dito kung saan nilalagay yung electric meter ng Meralco. So meron ditong metal strap, watertight connector, meter socket or meter base and yung non-metallic or non-watertight connector. Tapos makikita natin may NEMA 3R tayo dito kung saan dito nilalagay yung mga main breaker natin. So itong figure na to, ito yung makikita natin sa labas ng bahay. Next slide please. So, lipat naman tayo sa 2.25.1.21, yung multi-conductor cables on exterior surfaces of the buildings. Supports for multi-conductor cables on exterior surfaces of buildings shall be provided as 2.30.4.12. So, sabi dito is yung sa 2.30 point 4, point 12, yung mounting supports natin, dapat yung service cable shall be supported by straps or other approved means within 300 millimeter of every service head, goosenecks, or connection to a raceways or enclosure, and at intervals not exceeding 750 mm. So, ang sabi sa mounting supports, next tayo. So, nahati yung mounting support natin para sa service cables and sa other cables. And yung last is yung individual open conductor. So, pangunahan natin sa service cable. Service cable shall be supported by straps or other approved means within 300 millimeter of every service head, goosenecks, or connection to a raceway or enclosure, and at interval not exceeding 750 millimeter. So para sa ating mga service cable, dapat supported siya ng mga clamps or insulators. And dapat may support yung cable every 300 millimeter every service head or raceway. And dapat kada interval ng support ay dapat hindi lalagpas ng 750 millimeter para maiwasan ang pagkasira ng ating cables. And hindi din siya sasayaw kung may wind current na padating. So next, sa other cables naman, cables that are not approved for the mounting in contact with a building or other structure shall be mounted on insulating support installed at interval not exceeding 4,500 millimeter and in a manner that is maintained a clearance of not less than 15 millimeter from the surface over which they pass. So para naman dito, dapat natin gamitan ng insulator yung cables para makabit natin sa mga buildings or wall. Bawal ito sumagi sa wall dahil magkakos ito ng ground pag nagkiskisan yung wall between or yung wire. Pwedeng mabalatan yung wire natin pag nagkiskisan sila sa wall. So ang dapat yung allowance between the wall and the wire is dapat hindi bababa ng 50 millimeter. And yung sa interval naman between support dahil hindi siya tataas ng 4,500 millimeter dahil kung lumagpas tayo dito, pwede itong mag-cause ng sumayaw yung cable natin caused by wind current. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, kagaya din sa service cables. So next, lipat naman tayo sa individual open conductors. So makikita natin sa table na to, yung mga voltages, maximum distance between support and yung allowance dapat between the two wires. So for example, meron tayo dito 600 volts. So yung maximum distance ng support niya or yung interval na meron dapat na yung wire natin is 2.7 meters. So dapat ayun yung minimum na interval natin. So sa minimum clearance naman between two wires, so between conductors naman meron tayong 150 millimeter. So dapat ito yung allowance between two wires. And from the surface naman, yung allowance niya is 50 millimeter. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina from the other cables. So next tayo. Next please. So lipat tayo sa 2.25.1.22. Ito yung raceways on exterior surfaces of buildings or other structures. Raceways on exterior buildings or other structures shall be arranged to drain and shall be rain tight in wet locations. So ang exception nito is dapat flexible metal conduits were permitted in 3.48.2.3. One shall not be required to be rain tight. So ang sabi sa section na to, in wet locations unless the conductors are approved for the specific conditions and the installation is such that liquid is not likely to enter raceways or enclosure to which the conduit is connected. So sa section na ito, para ito sa mga cables na outdoor nilalagay. Dapat ang mga raceways or conduits sa outdoors ay wet-proof. Kumbaga, hindi siya napapasukan ng tubig. Kung mapasukan man siya, dapat naka-slope yung conduit natin para yung tubig mabilis na lumabas sa tubo or conduit natin. Next. Next tayo sa outdoor lamp holders, yung 2.35.1.24 outdoor lamp holders. Where outdoor lamp holders are attached as pendants, the connection to the circuit wire shall be staggered, where such lamp holders have terminal of a type that puncture the insulation and make contact with the conductor, they shall be attached only to conductors of a stranded type. So dapat yung sa lamp holders natin ay maayos yung pagka-install para ma-avoid yung short circuit kung nalaglag man yung mga lamp sa walls. And kung bibili tayo ng lamp sa mall, may kasamang terminal block yung device or lamps natin dahil ang use nun is para ma-avoid yung pigtail splice dahil yung pigtail splice na yon is weak yung pag nahila or pag nalaglag yung lamp natin, pwede siya mag-cause ng short circuit. Next. So lipat naman tayo sa 2.25.1.25, location of outdoor lamps. So location of outdoor lamps, lighting shall be below all energized conductors, transformers, or either electric utilization equipment unless either of the following apply. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, dapat yung mga lamp or mga lighting fixtures natin is malayo sa mga conductors or transformer. Next. So, yung location of outdoor lamps is natin sa dalawa, which apply. First is yung clearances or other safeguards are provided for relamping operations. Sa inyo pangalawa is equipment is controlled by a disconnecting means that can be locked in the open position. So yung sabi sa pangalawa is ito yung terminal block na mabibili natin or makikita or kasama sa bibili nating mga lighting fixtures. So ang use nitong terminal block is para madali natin siya ma-connect without splicing the wire. Next, lipat tayo sa 2.25.1.26, yung vegetation as supports. So sabi dito is vegetation such as trees shall not be used for supports of overhead conductor spans. Bawal na gawin nating poste yung anuman puno sa tabi ng kalsada dahil pwede ito mag-cause ng power interruption or ground sa lugar kung tumumba yung puno na gawa ng bagyo. So kaya makikita natin sa probinsya na meron tayong high transmission line. So yung high transmission line na yun is nakakabit siya sa malaking electrical tower. So yung electrical tower na yun is yung use nun is para ma-prevent yung mga tao na lumapit doon and mag-ground sila. So again, about naman sa 2.25.1.26, vegetation na support. Yung additional information is yung sa mga Meralco, makikita natin sa kalsada na merong wooden lugs na kinakabitan ng kuryente. Pwede naman siyang gamitin bilang mounting support sa mga wires natin dahil yung puno or tree log na nakikita natin na nakatayo na gamit ng Meralco is meron na siyang chemicals na pang-hardening. So, pag naulanan, hindi siya nabubulok. Kaya siya yung number 1 na ginagamit and low cost na ginagamit ng Meralco sa mga poste. So lipat tayo sa 2.25.2. So ito yung more than one building or other structure. So ang under nito is yung 2.25.2.1. So ang number of supplies where more than one buildings or structure is on the same property and under single management. Each additional building or other structures that is served by a branch circuit or feeder on the load side of the service disconnecting means shall be supplied by only one feeder or branch circuits unless permitted in 2.25.2.1a through E. For the purpose of this section, a multi-wire branch circuit shall be considered a single circuit. So next tayo. So ito yung A to E na first is yung special conditions. Additional feeders or branch circuits shall be permitted to supply the following: fire pumps, emergency systems, legally required standby systems, optional standby system, parallel power production system, and yung last system designed for connection to multiple sources of supply for the purpose of enhanced reliability. So, sa A, para sa mga special conditions, dapat may sariling service cable or feeder ito dahil in case of emergency na mamatay yung power sa compound or sa building natin, meron pa rin power yung mga lugar na ito for emergency purposes. Kaya dapat, so ito yung makikita natin. So makikita natin dito yung meter base, NEMA 3R, and yung switchboard natin. So after ng switchboard, meron tayong branch circuits and yung feeder. Yung feeder na yon is pwede siyang pumunta sa mga sinabi ko kanina about sa special conditions. So pag may nangyari sa branch circuit o sa loob ng hospital, yung sa mga special condition or places, hindi siya mamamatayan kasi may sarili siyang feeder. Next. Lipat tayo sa special occupancies, letter B. So, for the special occupancies, by special permission, additional feeders or branch circuits shall be permitted for either of the following. So, yung first natin is yung multiple occupancy, buildings where there is no space available for supply equipment accessible to all occupants. So yung pangalawa is a single building or other structure sufficiently large to make two or more supplies necessarily. So para sa special occupancy, pwede mag-add tayo ng another feeder kung approve lang ito ng professional personnel. And pwede lang tayo mag-add sa mga scenario ng multiple occupancy at sa mga building na malalaki yung load. Kasi pag mag-apply tayo ng Meralco or mag-apply tayo ng kuryente, meron tayong pinipili doon kung ano yung load na required sa bahay natin. So sa letter C naman, capacity requirements. Additional feeders or branch circuits shall be permitted where the capacity requirements are in excess of 2,000 amperes of a supply voltage of 600 volts or less. So ang sabi dito, ang pwede din tayo mag-add ng additional feeder kung kailangan natin ng different voltages. Mali pala. Ang sabi dito, pwede tayong mag-add ng another feeder kung saan yung load natin ay nag-exceed ng 2,000 amperes at a supply na 600 volt or less. Ito yung mga building na malaki yung lot area or matataas yung konsumo nila sa kuryente. Next. So letter D naman, different characteristics. Additional feeders or branch circuits shall be permitted for different voltages, frequencies, or phases for different uses, such as control of outside lighting from multiple locations. So sabi dito na pwede din tayo mag-additional feeder kung kailangan natin ng different voltages, frequencies, and phases. So ito, hindi naman siya for residential but more on siya kailangan sa mga factory or malalaking industry. Next, letter E. Documented switching procedures. Ang sabi dito is additional feeders or branch circuits shall be permitted to supply installation under single management where documented safe switching procedures are established and maintained for disconnection. So pwede rin mag-add tayo ng feeders kung yung building natin is in one management lang. Yung additional feeder is for backup purposes in case na magkaroon tayo ng emergency or maintenance purposes. So next, lipat tayo sa next please. Yan, okay. So lipat tayo sa 2.25.2.2. So ito yung disconnecting means. Means shall be provided for disconnecting all ungrounded conductors that supply or pass through the building or structures. Sabi dito na dapat lahat ng electrical system na meron tayo ay meron itong main switch or main breaker kung saan pwede natin siyang patayin in case of emergency or maintenance. So next, lipat naman tayo sa locations ng ating mga switchboards. So ang sabi dito sa 2.25.2.3, the disconnecting means shall be installed either inside or outside of the building or structure served or where the conductors pass through the building or structure. The disconnecting means shall be at a readily accessible location nearest the point of entrance of conductors. For the purposes of this section, the requirements in 2.30.1.6 shall be utilized. So sa location purposes, meron tayong 4 na exception. So yung unang exception is for the installation under a single management where documented safe switching procedures are established and maintained for disconnection and where the installation is monitored by qualified individuals, the disconnecting means shall be permitted to located elsewhere in the premises. So ang example nito is yung mga nasa compound. Dahil isang management na kinag-handle doon, pwede natin ilagay yung main switchboard sa isang powerhouse na malayo sa mga bahay. And dapat sa mga or professional engineers lang yung pwedeng kumalikot sa mga powerhouse kasi andun yung pinaka main breaker natin. And yung mga voltahe doon is or yung current is pwedeng mag-exceed ng 220 pataas. So ang exception number 2 is para naman to sa mga buildings or other structures qualified under the provision of Article 6.85, the disconnecting means shall be permitted to located elsewhere. So, sabi dito, para naman sa mga building na under Article 6.85, pwedeng ilagay yung switchboard around the premises na hindi makikita ng public or ng mga tao na wala namang kinalaman sa powerhouse. So, for the exception number 3, for towers or poles used as lighting standards, the disconnecting means shall be permitted to located elsewhere on the premises. So, itong exemption number 3, example nito is yung mga lighting poles na nasa kalsada natin. Yung switchboard dito is yung laging nasa malapit sa barangay dahil sila yung nag-handle ng lighting fixture sa buong community. Kaya minsan tanungin nyo yung mga barangay tanod kung nasan yung mga powerhouse nila. Tuturo nila yon laging malapit sa barangay. So last, yung exception number 4, for the poles or similar structures used only for the support or signs installed in accordance with Article 6.0, the disconnecting means shall be permitted to be located elsewhere on the premises. So ang example nito is yung mga billboards or poles sa parks. May mga powerhouse silang ginagawa dito para doon nila ilagay yung mga switchboards nila. Kaya makikita natin sa mga parks na may mga building doon malapit, minsan may exhaust yung para sa generator nila. Yung building na yon is for the purpose na doon nila ilalagay yung main switch nila or main breaker. So next. So lipat tayo sa 2.25.2.4. Ito yung maximum number of disconnects. So first, letter A, general. The disconnecting means for each supply permitted by 2.25.2.1 shall consist not more than 6 switches or 6 breakers mounted in a single enclosure in a group of separate enclosure or in or on a switchboard. There shall be no more than 6 disconnects per supply group in any locations. So ang exception nito is for the purposes of this section, disconnecting means used for solely for the control circuit of the ground fault protection system or the control circuits of the power operated supplied. Disconnecting means installed as a part of listed equipment shall be considered a supplied disconnecting means. So dapat yung mga conductors natin is may sarili siyang may sarili siyang breaker o switch. So makikita natin to sa mga panel box natin na yung mga wire is may sarili siyang mga single pole units. So next tayo is about naman ito sa single pole units. 2 or 3 single pole switches or breakers capable of individual operation shall be permitted on multi-wire circuit and 1 pole for each ungrounded conductor. As 1 multi-pole disconnects provided they are equipped with handle ties or a master handle to disconnect all ungrounded conductors with no more than 6 operation of the hand. So para naman sa current carrying conductors, dapat ito ay may sariling single pole unit. For example, 2 hot wires and isang neutral. Dapat dito is may 3 single pole units for protection. And kung mapapansin natin sa mga breaker, meron itong bridge connected sa mga lever ng single pole units. Ang purpose nito is para sabay natin sila ma-switch on or switch off regarding sa ground wire. And regarding naman sa ground wire natin, hindi na ito kailangan ng single pole unit or breaker kasi yung ground natin is hindi naman siya current carrier. So ang ibig sabihin ng current carrier is siya yung dinadalaw ng kuryente and connected siya sa device natin.
Okay. Hello guys, I'm Nelvin Jacob and I will be the next reporter. Dito tayo ngayon sa 2.25.2.5 which is the grouping of disconnects. Sa general, sabi, the 2 to 6 disconnects as permitted in 2.25.2.4 shall be grouped. Each disconnect shall be marked to indicate the load served. May exception tayo dito sa 2.25.2.5. Sabi dito, one of the 2 to 6 disconnecting means permitted in 2.25.2.4 were used only for a water pump also intended to provide fire protection shall be permitted to be located remote from the other disconnecting means. Una, bakit ba kailangan nating i-group itong mga disconnect na to? Sabi, ang disconnects daw ay primarily for maintaining the service in the on status. Sabi, ano yan, ang grouping is to limit the exposure for the unfused service conductor. Ngayon, bakit kailangan nating i-group itong mga disconnect na to? May kailangan nakagroup itong mga disconnect natin para in case of emergency, kunwari, halimbawa nagkaroon ng faulty electrical tayo dito, kailangan agad natin siyang ma-shutdown. Anong gagawin natin kung halimbawang yung mga disconnects natin nasa malalayong lugar? Halimbawa, yung isa nating disconnecting means nandito sa kabilang building, yung isa naman nandito sa kabila. Paano kung nagkaroon ng emergency? Hindi natin agad-agad mapapatay yung masya-shutdown agad yung sa may source natin. Ang mangyayari, bago pa natin mapatay, baka ubos na rin baka natupok na rin yung building kung sakaling nagkaroon tayo dito ng sunog o nagkaroon tayo ng insidente dito. Next please po. Dito ngayon tayo sa letter B, additional disconnecting means. Sabi dito, the one or more additional disconnecting means for fire pumps or for emergency legally required standby or optional standby system permitted by 2.25.2.1 shall be installed sufficiently remote from the 1 to 6 disconnecting means for normal supply to minimize the possibility of simultaneous interruption of supply. Dito naman, sinasabi dito sa additional disconnecting means, ano, basta itong yung one, 'di ba kanina dun sa general, sabi dun sa general kanina, ano yan ng 2 to 6 disconnecting means. Dito naman, sabi dito, ano yan ng one or more additional pwede pa tayo ditong maglagay ng additional disconnecting means para in case of ano nga yan, for in case of emergency, parehas ng katulad dito, para kung sakaling may sunog, madali nating ma-disconnect. Madali nating ma-disconnect, madali nating mapapatay. Next po. Lipat tayo ngayon dito sa 2.25.2.6, access of occupants. Sabi dito, in a multiple occupancy building, each occupant shall have access to the occupant supply disconnecting means. Bakit kaya kailangan na yung mga occupant, bakit kailangan kaya na meron silang access dun sa supply disconnecting means? Ganito lang yan, halimbawa sa isang multiple occupancy building, kung halimbawang nagkaroon dito ng yun nga, parehas ng nagka-short circuit kunwari, tapos pwedeng magkaroon tayo dito ng sunog, kinakailangan ding isaalang-alang yung safety ng mga occupants. Para kung sakaling nagkaroon ng ganung problema, nandun na rin naman sila, pwede nilang mapatay, pwede nilang pwede nilang mapatay sa supply. At may iwasan pa dun yung malaking problema, which is yun nga, yung masunog yung building. Dito naman sa exception, sabi, in a multiple occupancy building where electric supply and electrical maintenance are provided by the building management and where these are under continuous building management supervision, the supply disconnecting means supplying more than one occupancy shall be permitted to be accessible to authorized management personnel only. Meron namang mga building na meron silang tinatawag na katulad nitong sinabi dito, provided by building management. Dito sa meron silang mga tinatalagang mga authorized management personnel only. Sa mga building na may mga authorized personnel naman na pwedeng sila na yung mag-asikaso nun, sila na yung magpatay nung sa supply disconnecting means yun ang mas doon na natin pwedeng sabihin na hindi na dapat dapat sila na lang yung nakatalaga dun sa supply disconnecting means na yun. Hindi na dapat nakikialam dun yung mga occupants kung sakaling meron namang authorized management. Pero may mga pagkakataon naman na sa isang building hindi naman laging 24/7 nandun yung mga authorized personnel na yon. Paano kung may pagkakataon na ang nangyari wala mismo yung personnel na yun sa pwesto niya, tapos nagkaroon ngayon ng sunog o nagkaroon ngayon ng problema dun sa electrical nila, doon naman papasok yung sa access ng occupants na dapat meron silang access dun sa supply disconnecting means para kung sakali man na nagkaroon nga ng ganung mga problema, hindi na nila kailangang antayin pa yung management personnel only kasi nandun na rin naman sila at sila na yung pwedeng mag-shutdown nung source natin. Next po. Ngayon lipat tayo ngayon sa 2.25.2.7. Suitable for service equipment. Sabi dito, the disconnecting means specified in 2.25.2.2 shall be suitable for use as service equipment. Sa 2.25.2.7, meron din tayo ditong exception. Sabi dito, for garage and outbuildings on residential property, a snap switch or a set of three-way or four-way snap switches shall be permitted as the disconnecting means. Sabi, dito sa 2.25.2.7, kinakailangan meron tayo ditong main breaker Tapos, sa exception naman dito, sabi, for garage and outbuildings, yung sa mga halimbawa sa mga labas na ng bahay natin, labas na ng mga gusali, labas na ng mga residential property natin. Kinakailangan din meron din tayo ditong mga snap switch o katulad niya ng binigay na na halimbawa dito, halimbawa mga three-way or four-way snap switches natin. Ano yun ang kailangan meron tayo nun para meron tayong additional na na disconnecting means dun mismo sa outside ng ating residential property. Next po. Ngayon lipat tayo ngayon dito sa 2.25.2.8 identification. Sabi dito, where a building or structure has any combination of feeders, branch circuits, or services passing through it or supplying it, a permanent plaque or directory shall be installed at each feeder and branch circuit disconnect location denoting all other services, feeders, or branch circuits supplying that building or structure or passing through that building or structure and the area served by each. Next po tayo. Dito sa 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 identification, kinakailangan din dito, halimbawa, kailangan din dito na meron tayong dapat madali nating ma-identify. Pwede tayong gumamit dito ng mga ng mga halimbawa sticker o kaya ng mga marks kung halimbawa ito ba circuit o ito kung para lang maano halimbawa branch circuit to feeders o tapos kung saan siya kung saan siya naka-connect. Pwede tayong gumamit ng mga stickers doon para madali nating ma-identify. Tapos punta tayo sa exception number 1, ano po? Sabi, a plaque or directory shall not be required for large capacity. Sabi daw, yung mga plaque natin or directory natin, hindi siya required sa mga large capacity, dun sa mga malalaking lugar natin, malalaking building natin. Ulitin natin. Sabi, a plaque or directory shall not be required for large capacity multi-building industrial installations under single management. Yun pala, yan. Itong mga plaque natin na to, hindi pala talaga siya required, hindi siya advisable, hindi siya pwede dun sa malalaking building natin na under lang siya sa single management lang, where it is ensured that this connection can be accomplished by establishing and maintaining sweep switching procedures. Ito tayo ngayon sa exception number 2. Sabi, this identification shall not be required for branch circuits installed from a dwelling unit to a second building or structure. Ano ba yung tinutukoy natin dito na mga dwelling unit? Okay, itong mga second building or structure. Ito yung sinasabi na na sabi dito yung identification doon ay hindi siya nire-required dun sa mga mga naka-installed na branch circuits, dun sa mga parang mga extension lang ng bahay natin, halimbawa yun nga from dwelling unit o kaya sa second building or structure. Next po tayo. Ngayon, dito tayo ngayon sa 2.25.2.9. Ito yung disconnect construction. Sabi dito, disconnecting means shall meet the requirements of 2.25.2.9A through D. Sa disconnect construction, meron tayo ditong mga exception. Sabi dito, for garage and outbuildings on residential property, snap switches or sets of three-way or four-way snap switches shall be permitted as the disconnecting means. Ngayon punta po tayo dun sa next slide. Sa A po tayo. Dito po tayo. Di ba po sabi kanina, dito daw po sa disconnect construction, meron tayong A to D na mga disconnecting means natin dito. Ano po? Sabi sa A, manually or power operable. Basahin natin. Sabi, the disconnecting means shall consist of either 1, a manually operable switch or a circuit breaker equipped with a handle or other suitable operating means, or number 2, a power operable switch or circuit breaker provided the switch or circuit breaker can be opened by hand in the event of a power failure. dito pala sa manually or power operable, meron pala tayo ditong dalawa o binubuo pala to ng ng dalawang bahagi. Yung una, ano eh, ng manually operable switch circuit equipped with a handle or meron siyang yun nga sabi dito, operable switch or circuit breaker equipped with a handle or other suitable operating means. Dito naman sa number 2, ano yun ang sabi dito, provided the switch or circuit breaker can be opened by hand in the event of a power failure. Pwede natin siyang buksan gamit lamang yung mga pwede nating ayusin o pwede nating halimbawa in case na meron tayong mga power failure, pwede nating pakialaman gamit yung kamay natin. Under po ito sa manual or power operable. Dito naman tayo sa letter B. Sabi, simultaneous opening of poles. Sabi dito, each building or structure disconnecting means shall simultaneously disconnect all ungrounded supply conductors that it controls from the building or structure wiring system. Sabi naman, dito naman, sabi ano yun, ang each building or structure disconnecting means daw, dapat magkakasabay silang magkasabay na nadi-disconnect yung lahat ng ungrounded supply natin na conductors. Yun nga po. Next po tayo. May letter C pa pala tayo. Dito sa letter C, sabi, disconnection of grounded conductors. Where the building or structure disconnecting means does not disconnect the grounded conductor from the grounded conductors in the building or structure wiring, other means shall be provided for this purpose at the location of disconnecting means. A terminal or bus to which all grounded conductors can be attached by means of pressure connectors shall be permitted for this purpose. In multi-section switchboard, disconnects for the grounded conductor shall be permitted to be in any of the switchboard provided by such switchboard is marked. Next po tayo. Letter D, indicating. The building or structure disconnecting means shall plainly indicate whether it is in the open or closed position. Yun nga, dito sa part na to, sa letter D, dapat daw yung building or mga structure natin, yung mga disconnecting means ng building or structure natin, dapat madali nating malalaman kung open ba o in closed position. Sa papanong paraan nga, kailangan naka-indicate yun kung ito bang disconnecting means na to, open ba siya o nasa closed position. Next po tayo. Ngayon, dito naman po tayo sa 2.25.2.10 rating of disconnect. Sabi dito, the feeder or branch circuit disconnecting means shall have a rating of not less than the load to be supplied, determined in accordance with parts 2.20.1 and 2.20.2 for branch circuits, parts 2.20.3 or 2.20.4 for feeders, or part 2.20.5 for farm loads. In no case shall the rating be lower than specified in 2.25.2.1 or 2.25.2.10 A, B, C, or D. Next po tayo. Dito po tayo sa letter A. Sabi, dito sa letter A, which is one circuit installation or installations to supply only limited loads of a single branch circuit, the branch circuit disconnecting means shall have a rating of not less than 15 amperes. Sabi dito, ano yun ang pagka single branch lang, kasi sabi one circuit installation siya, pag single branch siya, ano po? Pag single branch lang, yung disconnecting means nung branch circuit na yun, hindi dapat siya bababa sa 15 amperes. Dapat 15 amperes na siya talaga, hindi na siya bababa dun sa mismong 15 amperes na yun. Ngayon dito tayo sa two circuit installations. For installations consisting of not more than two two-wire branch circuits, the feeder or branch circuit disconnecting means shall have a rating of not less than 30 amperes. Ngayon, kung kanina dun sa may one circuit installation tapos single branch circuit lang siya, hindi dapat siya bababa sa 15 amperes. Dito naman sa two circuit installation, which is not more than two wire branch circuits na siya, or the feeder or branch circuit neto, or yung disconnecting means ng feeder or ng branch circuits, hindi naman siya bababa sa 30 amperes naman. Next po tayo. Ngayon, letter C, one family dwelling. For a one family dwelling, the feeder disconnecting means shall have a rating of not less than 100 amperes T-wire. Kung kanina, not less than 15 amperes sa one branch, doon sa two branch circuit naman, 60, not less than 60 amperes. Dito naman sa one family dwelling, since one family dwelling, marami na sila dito, dapat yung disconnecting means nito, hindi naman siya bababa sa 100 amperes. And next dito sa letter D, all others. For all other installations, the feeder or branch circuit disconnecting means shall have a rating of not less than 60 amperes. Next po tayo. Ngayon, dito po tayo ngayon sa 2.25.2.11, which is the access to overcurrent protective devices. Next po tayo. Sabi dito, where a feeder overcurrent device is not readily accessible, branch circuit overcurrent devices shall be installed on the load side, shall be mounted in a readily accessible location, and shall be of a lower ampere rating than the feeder overcurrent device. Dito, basically, pag meron tayong overcurrent protective device, dapat dapat siya, readily accessible na siya. Hindi lang basta sinabing ready sabi dito pala, where a feeder overcurrent is not readily accessible. Yun nga, kapag hindi pa readily accessible yung overcurrent device natin o yung feeder overcurrent device natin, kailangan daw dito yung branch circuit overcurrent device shall be installed. Sa madaling sabi kanina, if there is overcurrent protective device, then it needs to be readily accessible. Hindi lang readily accessible, dapat din installed na siya. Dapat installed na natin yung mga overprotective device natin na yan. Ano ba yung mga overprotective o overcurrent protective device na yon? Halimbawa, yung mga tinatawag natin na switches with fuse, tapos yung mga circuit breaker natin. Next po tayo. Ngayon, dito po tayo ngayon sa 2.25.3.1, the sizing of conductors. Sabi dito, the sizing of conductors over 600 volts shall be in accordance with 2.10.2.1b for branch circuits and 2.15.1.2b for feeders. dahil na alam naman natin yung natakal naman na yung 2.10.2.1 tsaka 2.15.1. O 2.15.1.2, ganito na lang. Bakit ba importante yan na malaman natin yung sizing of conductors na to? Kasi kung halimbawang mataas yung voltahe na dumadaloy sa isang conductors natin, tapos yung conductor naman napakanipis o napakaliit, ang mangyayari niyan masusunog yung conductors. Pwedeng maging saniyan ng sunog ng incident. Halimbawa, yan yung masunog yung gusali. Kaya kinakailangan talaga na yung size ng conductors natin dapat naaayon siya sa kung gaano kataas o kung gaano kalaki yung voltahe na pumapasok o dadaan diyan para maiwasan natin yung mga hindi naman natin hinahangad na mangyari tulad nga ng mga sunog o yung mga pwede rin kasing maging saniyan na pwede yung maging sanina, ma-electrocute tayo, pwede tayong makuryente dyan kapag hindi akma yung sukat ng mga conductors natin sa taas ng voltahe na pumapasok. Next po tayo. Sa 2.25.30 or 2.25.3.2, which is the isolating switches. Sabi dito, where oil switches or air, oil vacuum, or sulfur hexafluoride circuit breakers constitute a building disconnecting means an isolating switch with visible break contacts and meeting the requirements of 2.30, 0.8.5b, C, and D shall be installed on the supply side of the disconnecting means and all associated equipment. Dito sa 2.25.3.2 na isolating switches natin, may exception din. Sabi, the isolating switch shall not be required where the disconnecting means is mounted and on removable track panels or metal enclosed switchgear units that cannot be opened unless the circuit is disconnected, and that, when removed from the normal operating position, automatically disconnect the circuit breaker or switch from all energized parts. Ano ba itong mga tinatawag nating isolating switches na to? Sabi, ang isolator switch or isolating switch, yan yung mga device or systems na nag-isolate ng particular circuit for maintenance and prevent currents from passing through. Sabi, ano yan ang halimbawa na lang, meron kang aayusin, merong nagka-problema sa circuit mo. Tapos may gusto mong ayusin yung circuit na nagkaroon ng problema. Halimbawa nag-short circuit kunwari. Kung wala kang isolating switch, tapos basta-basta mo na lang inayos yung circuit, tapos nakabukas pa siya, ibig sabihin meron pang dumadaloy na current dun sa circuit mo, tapos basta mo na lang inayos nang wala ka namang isolating switch, anong mangyayari sa iyo nun? Mamamatay ka nun dahil pwede kang makuryente doon. Pwede kang makuryente. At himala na lang kung mabuhay ka pa kung walang isolating switch. Kasi para saan ba yung isolating switch na yan? Kung halimbawa meron kang isolating switch, tapos nagka-problema yung circuit mo, tapos gusto mong ayusin, pwede mong gamitin yung isolating switch na yan. Pwede mong i-switch off yan. Pwede mong switch off na yan para ma-prevent yung current na dumadaloy dun sa circuit para hindi na siya tumuloy. Kasi itong mga isolating switches natin, tinatawag din to bilang knife switch. Ibig sabihin, dun pa lang sa kategorya niya na knife switch, pinuputol na ito yung daloy ng kuryente. Kumbaga ina-isolate niya yung kuryente para kung sakaling may aayusin ka nga, hindi ka madadamage, hindi ka makukuryente. Next po tayo. Ngayon, dito tayo sa 2.25 or 2.2.25.3.3, which is the location. Sabi dito, a building or structure disconnecting means shall be located in accordance with 2.25.2.3, or it shall be electrically operated by a similarly located remote control device. Itong 2.25.2.3 na to, na-discuss na to ng unang reporter. Pero tignan natin itong diagram. Kung makikita natin, merong yung connection ng dalawa, hindi siya separate yung building nila or yung structure na sinusuplayan nung feeder natin or branch circuit. Next po tayo. Doon naman sa 2.25.3.4 type, each building or structure, or ulitin natin, each building or structure disconnect shall simultaneously disconnect all ungrounded supply conductors it controls and shall have a fault closing rating not less than the maximum available short circuit current available at its supply terminals. Where fused switches or separately mounted fuses are installed, the fuse characteristics shall be permitted to contribute to the fault closing rating of the disconnecting means. Next po tayo. Dito naman po tayo sa 2.25.3.11, which is the clearances over roadways, walkways, rail, water, and open land. Sa itong 2.25.3.11, meron tayo ditong 3 categories. Sa una, sabi dito 22 kilovolt nominal to ground or less. Sabi, the clearances over roadways, walkways, rail, water, and open land for conductors and live parts up to 22 kilovolt nominal to ground or less shall be not less than the values shown in table 2.25.3.11. Makikita natin mamaya yung table. Dito naman sa B, over 22 kilovolt nominal to ground, clearances for the categories shown in table 2.25.3.11 shall be increased by 10 mm or 0.4 inches per 0.4 inch per kilovolt above 22,000 volts. Dito naman sa letter C, special cases. For special cases such as where crossings will be made over lakes, rivers, or areas using large vehicles such as mining operations, specific design shall be engineered considering the special circumstances and shall be approved by the authority having jurisdiction. Next po tayo. 2.25.3.12, clearances over buildings and other structures. Sabi dito, a 22 kilovolt nominal to ground or less, the clearances over buildings and other structures for conductors and live parts up to 22 kilovolt nominal to ground or less shall be not less than the values shown in table 2.25.3.12. Mamaya makikita natin yung table. Letter B, over 22 kilovolt nominal to ground, clearances for the categories shown in table 2.25.3.12 shall be increased by 10 mm, 0.4 inches, or 0.4 inch per kilovolt above 22,000 volts. Next po tayo. Yan, ito po yung table na tinutukoy po nung nandun tayo sa 2.25.3.11 clearances. Makikita natin diyan sa open land subject to vehicles, si 5.6, roadways 5.6, walkways natin, yung clearance is 4.1, railways 8.1, spaces 4.4, water areas not suitable for boating 5.2 ang clearance natin. Dito naman sa sinasabi kanina sa may 2.25.3.12, tong table na to, sinasabi dito, yun nga, makikita natin sa table, building walls projections 2.3 horizontal, balconies 2.3, yung over roofs natin 2.3, and other structures 2.3 meters po ito lahat. And that's all po for our report. Thank you.
So, thank you for listening. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to click the bell button.